Hi, everyone. My name is Juan Estrada. Thank you for joining us tonight for District 5 United meeting. And District 5 United strives to improve the quality of life in East San Jose. And one way is to ensure that residents in East San Jose and throughout the city, depending on the topic, get the information they need to make decisions or regarding resources, etc. So we'll go ahead and start again. Step Forward Foundation, we have, give me just a second, Christian Ollano, and you'll have to tell me if I said that wrong, Josué García, and Ruth Silver-Taube, and I'll hand it off to you now, and I will go off video.
Juan, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. Good to see you as always. And hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. My name is Josué García, and with my team today, we have a top-notch attorney, Ruth Silver-Taube, very involved in the community and very passionate about workers' rights. We also have an excellent presenter, and Christian Ollano. He's going to be making the presentation. And like Juan mentioned, at the end, we will have Q&A. Please make sure you put your question, like Juan mentioned. I want to make an emphasis that this presentation is on workers' rights under COVID-19, and also how to apply for benefits if you qualify or how to qualify. If your question is not answered, or if you need us to present to one of your groups, your individual groups, we are available to do so. And we can also do it in different languages. Just contact us. Juan, we will put our contact information, but Juan can share it as well. Please make sure you contact us because we can help. Or even if you have individuals with questions that you may have, and we go through the presentation, feel free to pass our information to your family members and friends so they can contact us. We want to be able to help. Okay, Christian, please. Besides Christian and Ruth and myself, we have a bigger group in the team that is helping us deal with these issues throughout the county. So it's not just us, but please feel free to contact us. Christian?
Great, thank you, Josué. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Great, so I'm going to share my screen. My name is Christian Ollano. I'm a community outreach worker with the Step Forward Foundation based in Santa Clara County. I have a 20-minute presentation for you all. Let's see if I can share my screen real quick. Thank you, Juan, for inviting us today. We're happy that we could share these resources to the community. As you know, there's many different benefits out there. The trouble can be trying to navigate them. So that's where we come in, try to express what new resources and benefits are out there and seeing if we can answer any questions that you might have. As was stated before, we ask that you hold questions till the end of the 20-minute presentation, at which point Attorney Ruth Silver-Taube can help answer them. So again, we are part of the Step Forward Foundation. Just a brief, let's see if I can. Oh, there we go. This is the agenda for today. We're going to first cover what are the responsibilities of employers really quickly under COVID. And then we'll spend a majority of the time focused on workers' rights under COVID, which includes anything from the new paid sick leave ordinances and laws that were recently passed to state disability insurance, paid family leave, and what to do if you think you're being retaliated by an employer. And then we'll end by sharing an abundance of resources that you may have seen already and some of which you may not have. So these are the California Emergency Temporary Standards, which was implemented December 1, 2020. Let's see. There's two key responsibilities for employers. One, of course, would be to identify hazards under a specific work site that might potentially endanger workers for COVID-19. And then two, to implement measures to control and mitigate workers' exposure to COVID-19. So what are some ways to mitigate worker exposure to COVID-19? Let's see if I can. So there's 6 main measures, among other things, which could include, as you all know, staying socially distant from other workers 6 feet apart, Providing adequate ventilation, having face coverings, providing hand washing stations, cleaning practices, and very important, notifying workers of potential exposures. It's important to know that your employer, if someone catches COVID in the workplace, they are required to stay quarantined and isolated for 10 days before they come back to work. And the employer also has a responsibility to determine and who else may have been exposed, and requiring them to also stay isolated for 10 days before coming to work too, to mitigate exposure for other workers. And they have 24 hours, 1 business day, to, within writing, to express to workers if they were exposed. And again, as I said before, exposed workers should be excluded from the workplace for 10 days. Should a worker test positive, they are entitled and have access to free COVID testing from the employer. As I'll mention later in the presentation, they should have paid sick leave. And of course, most importantly, they should stay home and recover. So within, there's certain definitions of what an outbreak is. If 3 or more workers test positive or become ill within a 14-day period, that is considered an outbreak from these temporary emergency standards. And with that, employers have added responsibilities to provide COVID testing for these workers, and also to notify a public health department. And I believe in Santa Clara County, employers are required to inform the county's public health department within 4 hours of discovering that someone had tested positive in the workplace for COVID. Also important for employers to know is to maintain accurate records of COVID outbreaks and COVID exposures. And they should keep information confidential. Although they may ask questions about COVID-19 illnesses, it's important to know that the information you share should be kept confidential. So just to recap for employers' responsibilities, employers should provide personal protective equipment, including face masks, or reimburse them to employees for the cost, offer testing for COVID-19, or permit employees to get tested during working hours for free, create and implement and share a disinfection and safety plan with all workers, and according to Assembly Bill 685, inform all workers, including subcontractors, of potential COVID exposures within 1 day, alongside notice of their potential benefits and options. If there is an outbreak, they should also notify the local public health departments. And as I said before, maintain proper records of potential outbreaks at work. And if you need more information, you can find that website there. We'll also be sharing this at the end of the presentation. So on to workers' rights. So first off, with workers' rights, one thing to note is these labor rights and protections are included for all workers and apply to all workers regardless of immigration status. One of the main things that you might be having questions are, or heard in the news recently, is about California's new state supplemental paid sick leave, which was implemented on March 29 of this year. It provides 80 hours, 2 weeks of paid sick leave for workers who work for businesses, employers with 26 or more employees. If they can't work to one of three reasons: illness or exposure to COVID-19, if you're getting vaccinated, and if you have side effects, that corresponding recovery time, and also family care and caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed or unavailable to COVID-19 on the premises, which is important. And also key to note is it's retroactive. So even though it was implemented March 29th, you can, if you had a vaccine or shot and took time during working hours to get that, you can request that paid sick leave pay if you did that as early as January 1 of this year, and it is effective until September 30th of this year as well. And the rate of pay is highest of your regular rate of pay or the state local minimum wage, whichever is higher, can't exceed $511 per day and $5,110 in total. And again, as I mentioned before, it is retroactive as of January 1 of this year. In addition, I think this applies to most of you. San Jose has its own paid sick leave urgency ordinance, and it similar to the state ordinance. It provides this additional paid sick leave for COVID positive workers, workers who've been exposed, have symptoms, and it has a much broader definition for what you can use. Workers who must stay home to care for a child because school is closed and have no other option. And this is a little bit better than the state supplement because it applies to all workers who work in businesses, regardless of the business size. So if you work for an employer with less than 26 employees, and you work in San Jose specifically, it would apply to you. On top of that, paid sick leave, there's many different variations. Beyond COVID and these state supplements and city supplements, every worker should be entitled to 1 hour of paid sick leave every 30 hours of work, capped at 24 hours or 3 days a year. And you can, similar to what was stated before, you can use this sick leave due to other illnesses, including for COVID-19, but for other illnesses as well, diagnosis, care, treatment of an existing health condition, including COVID-related items, and then for preventative care. One thing to note, as I mentioned with the emergency temporary standard, is something called exclusion pay. Must an employer pay an employee while the employee must quarantine and has no symptoms? If the exposure is work-related and the employee does not have symptoms and can work but must quarantine, an employer may this exclusion pay applies to you. An employer may require that the employee to exhaust the paid sick leave first, however. In the case that an employee is unable to work because they do have COVID-19 symptoms, the employer would not be, the employee would not be eligible for this exclusion pay, but they can apply for workers' compensation and state disability insurance, which I'll go to right now, actually. Workers' compensation. And I should mention, this is a lot of information, so please, if you have any questions, hold off. And there are numbers and resources which you can refer to and contact after the presentation as well, should you have specific questions. And again, we have a Q&A at the end as well. Workers' compensation is a benefit provided to workers if they become ill due to a workplace-related injury or illness, and it partially replaces wages lost during their recovery time. And in the end, to help them return to work. It's required by all employers to provide this benefit to workers who are sick and injured because of work, which includes COVID. So if a worker thinks they got infected at work, they have the right to workers' comp, and they should notify their employer right away if they think they got it at work, and file that workers' compensation claim. If your employer doesn't give you the claim form, or if you need additional support, you can contact that number there. So what qualifies, you might be wondering, what qualifies as work-related COVID? So there are several presumptions. One, which isn't included, is if you work in healthcare, and you get COVID, that's a presumption. Also, as a presumption is if at the workplace there are 5 or more employees who test positive for COVID, if an outbreak exists within 14 days, of one of the following occurring at a specific work site. So whether 4 employees test positive, if the employer has 100 employees or fewer, or 4% of the workers test positive if there are more than 100 employees. And the workplace, again, as mentioned, is required to disclose these outbreaks to the local public health department. But even then, without any other people or employees getting COVID, you can still file a workers' comp claim, even if it's just you. Other worker benefits include the FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and the California Family Rights Act. This applies to work-related and non-work-related illnesses and injuries. So this allows you basically to take up to 12 weeks a year off with no pay, however, and if there are 5 employees in your workplace and you have worked for a year and worked at least 25 hours per week. So this enables you, if you have an illness going longer than 2 weeks or the 80 hours, then you can take leave, but you can ensure that you have a job when you come back. So what qualifies as a serious health condition under FMLA and CFRA? This includes condition requiring overnight inpatient hospital stay, if you're incapacitated for 3 days or more, chronic health conditions such as asthma, migraines, terminal incurable illnesses, multiple treatments such as chemotherapy. Minor illnesses are not serious health conditions, however, such as a cold. And privacy is important. Employer can't require employee to disclose diagnosis under the California Family Rights Act because of California privacy laws. An employer may not demand release of medical records. An employer can't request more information than is specified. So other benefits for non-work related injuries and illnesses. So let's say you get something outside of work, or you get COVID outside of work. There's state disability insurance. It's a program that employees pay into. So you might see that on your pay stub. That pays benefits if a worker is unable to work because of non-work related injuries or illnesses such as COVID-19. Again, similar to what was said before, it's a partial wage replacement up to 52 weeks for non-work, non-industrial illnesses or injuries. Up to 60 to 70% of your weekly wage is given to you each week. To qualify, you do need approval and evidence from a healthcare professional. There's a 7-day waiting period, but none for COVID. And that's the website you can apply to if you wish to apply. And if you are denied, you can appeal within 30 days. So let's say you have a close family member that is sick, and they have COVID or other sicknesses. There's something called paid family leave, which you can apply for. And similar to state disability insurance, it is up to 60 to 70% of wages, and it gives you up to 8 weeks off per year. Employers may require an employee to use up to 2 weeks of vacation pay first. It's 100% employee funded. So as mentioned, you could see this in your pay stub already. And then for care, it could be applied for care for a child, spouse, domestic partner, parent, grandparent, grandchild, sibling, parent-in-law with a serious health condition, or to bond for a first year with a child. And that's the application site if you need to apply. So another question you might be asking yourself is your employer allowed to require you to have a negative COVID test before coming back to work? And this provides an outline. If they are asking you to provide a negative COVID test, but you don't feel any symptoms, or you got it, but you still test positive, you can provide that employer with a letter from the county. You can also call the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement Legal Advice line, and we can call the employer for you. You can also file for unemployment if you're documented, or file a claim with DFEH or EEOC. Ruth, did you have anything to add?
Just that the California Family Rights Act, not the FMLA, is the law that allows you to take the time off if there's 5 employees. It just changed this year to 5 employees. Also for workers' comp, let's say you got COVID at work and you applied for workers' comp, but your employer doesn't think so. So they're fighting it out. And in the meantime, you're not getting any benefits. You can apply for state disability in the meantime. And then if you do get workers' comp, they'll work it out. So that's something that's good to know.
Thank you, Ruth, for that. So we're almost done. I'm going to talk about retaliation. So you may have encountered this or know someone that has encountered potential retaliation. What do you think? What do you do if you think you're being retaliated? What you need to know is that all workers are protected from retaliation if you do one of several actions: raise a concern about hazards, illnesses, or injuries, not just about COVID, but really anything. If you organize or take action together, if you request to take paid leave, if you file a workers' compensation claim, or any other complaint with a government agency, you are protected from retaliation. one thing to note is retaliation is illegal. What are examples of retaliation? If an employer fires a person who speaks up or organizes, if an employer makes threats to change a person's pay or working conditions to something less desirable, if an employer prevents a person from getting promotions or other job advancements, or they make threats related to immigration enforcement. So this is retaliation is illegal. So if you do think you're being retaliated, you can file a claim with the Labor Commission, and the statute of limitations is now a year, and that's the link below to file. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, these protections apply to all workers regardless of immigration status. So we wanted to share some resources. You may have seen this already, but it's been getting out a lot. But the county has something called the Isolation and Quarantine Support Program Hotline. If you or a family member has experienced COVID, and in the Bay Area, things can get cramped. So isolation and quarantine can be difficult. There is a resource that the county can provide hotel services for a person who needs to quarantine, meals, groceries. Call that number there if you do need support for that. Also, short plug for vaccination. As you may have heard, eligibility in Santa Clara County is now open for vaccination for all adults 16 years and up. So those are the sites that you can get vaccinated at and get an appointment. I believe some spots are closed, but keep it up and keep checking the site as spots do open from time to time. And testing, don't forget to get tested regularly too, even if you have been vaccinated. So this was a lot of information. If you'd like to explore more of your rights on your own, feel free to go to this site, saferatwork.covid19.ca.gov, which is offered by the state. And then these are other resources too. And then finally, locally, if you have any questions, feel free to call the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement Advice Line. It's for workers and employers, and we can have a legal professional answer any questions for you. We do have the capacity to help workers and people in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Visayan, Mandarin, and Hindi, Punjabi. This is also the site where you can file health complaints anonymously. You can also contact, if you have more specific questions, the Catherine and George Alexander Community Law Center at that number there. And with that, I know that was a lot. I hope we have some time for Q&A, but I'm going to pass it off to Ruth Silver-Taube, who can answer any of the questions you might have.
All right, attendees, if you, Christian, if you get a chance to stop sharing your screen.
There we go.
All right, okay. So attendees, if you have any questions, please do pose them using the Q&A feature, and then I will promote you to a panelist so that you could pose it on the screen, share it with all of us. And there was one question, and that is, if a question isn't answered, are they recorded somewhere? We could do that, but at this time, I really don't see any questions. Ruth, did you want to give us information while we wait to see if there are questions?
Well, I just want to emphasize again that the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement Advice Line is there for you. And sometimes people have trouble navigating it, but basically if you call and you do nothing, you'll end up with the English line. If you want the Spanish line, you press 2. The Vietnamese is 3. The Tagalog is 4. The Mandarin is 5. And the Punjabi Hindi is 6. So that's how you navigate the advice line. And we, as Christian said, we answer questions. I'm on the English line and I supervise the advice line, and we answer any questions to do with the workplace. We also can refer you, because I am the supervising attorney at the Catherine and George Alexander Community Law Center. So I know a lot of the other local nonprofit attorneys who do housing, public benefits, etc. So if you do need a referral to somebody else, we can certainly refer you. And as Christian said, we can file these anonymous complaints for you. And they don't just have to be about the workplace. They could be about a restaurant that you go to, an event that you go to where no one's wearing masks or there's no social distancing.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. And we do have a question from Deborah. Deborah, would you like to share your audio and video to pose your question, please? I'll give it a few seconds.
Yeah. My question is, I'm a temporary employee of a company. Do all these benefits apply to me also?
They do. All the benefits apply to you. You would end up getting less money than you would. The 3 days sick pay would be prorated depending upon how much you would make in those 3 days, but they do. As long as you're a W-2 employee, it all applies to you. It does not apply to independent contractors, but it does apply to temporary, part-time, any type of employee who's a W-2 employee.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, and we have a question from Ernest. Ernest, if you could share your audio and video to pose your question, please.
Unmute video. Okay. Okay, my niece's restaurant where she works, they'd asked some of the employees were they vaccinated? Is that illegal for them to be doing that now?
That's a really good question. It's somewhat of a gray area. However, the EOC has guidelines around testing, and it may be very much the same for vaccinations. As long as they don't make people say they've been vaccinated or don't stop them from working if they have a medical condition that prevents them from getting the vaccine or a religious objection. But other than that, it does look like employers can require you to be vaccinated to come back to work. I don't know whether that's what they're doing. If they're just asking it, that probably is okay, because they are allowed to ask you if you've been tested, but there's no definitive answer to that yet. There is about testing, and this is very abnormal, because normally your employer cannot ask you medical questions, but because of COVID, the EOC, that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that enforces the disability laws, the religious discrimination laws. What they say is that they can make you get tested, require you to get tested. In terms of the vaccine, they haven't issued a guidance yet, but we're assuming, and we're seeing employers asking those questions and requiring people, as long as there's the 2 exemptions.
Okay.
Okay, so next we have a question from Fran. Fran, would you like to share your audio and video? And Ruth, I wanted to note that your video is off. I'm not sure if that's intentional.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can put it back on. I apologize. No, it wasn't.
Fran, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
My question really is about those families who's got a one worker in the family, and that person dies. How does the family benefit from any of these benefits?
Well, these benefits are only for workers. If you're working, these are benefits that you get. If you're a W-2 employee, my condolences if there's someone who died, but yeah, they're not available now. There is a bill in the legislature for bereavement pay, but that hasn't passed yet.
So unless you're working, if you get sick of COVID, you're on your own?
Well, you can go to the county and they, as Christian said, if you're below a certain income, they will put you up in a hotel and they'll buy you groceries. And if you want to stay in your home, they'll bring you food and they'll also bring you any cleaning supplies you need. But there isn't any pay. There isn't any pay. The sick pay only applies if you're working, unfortunately.
Okay, I guess if you died and your family depended on your income, you're basically on your own.
It's sad, but that's true.
Okay,
Oh, you might, well, if you're disabled, you could apply for social, if you did work and you worked for a number of years, or even if you're very low income, you could apply for Social Security disability insurance if you're disabled, or supplemental security insurance, SSI. So you could apply for one of those two if you're disabled physically or mentally. So if you end up getting COVID and you end up getting the long COVID where you continue to have symptoms, then you could speak with one of the nonprofits like Bay Area Legal Aid or the Law Foundation, or there are Social Security attorneys who could help you. But you have to have some kind of a work history or be very low income for those.
I understand. I just thought that maybe people should have considered helping those whose income earner died.
That maybe you can propose some legislation for that.
All right, thank you, friend, for voicing the concern. And yeah, and definitely like all of you, I feel for the person who's in this situation, and hopefully the state can come up with, or the.
I'm hoping, yes.
All right. Well, Ruth, Christian, and Josué, thank you for taking the time to present.